Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7 with me, Gordon Ross. Here's today's coronavirus update, first of all. As of 2 p.m. today, a total of 268,059 people in Scotland have now been tested through NHS Scotland labs and the UK government's regional testing centres. Of these, 1,161,155 were found to be negative. 106,904 were positive. There are now 734 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. There have been, however, no reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. Of course, this is an underestimate of the number of cases. Not everyone who has the virus will display the symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. Of the people who have tested positive, 1,012 were in hospital last night, 46 of whom were in intensive care. The number of patients in Scotland who died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 4,111. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. Now, the UK daily figures are normally published at 4 o'clock today, but as of 7 p.m. we still haven't been able to get hold of them. Now, if you'd like to join the conversation here tonight, you can do so, of course, by joining us on Twitter, by following us at Broadcast Scot and using the hashtag Scotland@7. Now to tonight's main stories. And the first vaccinations are taking place in care homes in Scotland today. The first vaccinations in care homes have now taken place. 90-year-old Annie Innes was the first care home resident in the country to receive the vaccine. Annie had worked as a carer herself for over 14 years and has been living in the Abercorn House Care Home in Hamilton for the last 6 months. Staff from NHS Lanarkshire administered vaccines to 52 residents as the rollout of the vaccination programme continued. The second to receive their first dose at the care home was the former bartender, 82-year-old Margaret Keating, who has been a resident at Abercorn for just over a year. Those issuing the vaccines became the first to get their initial doses on Tuesday, the 8th of December. Now, a 16th poll in a row has shown majority support for Scottish independence. A new poll by Survation has found that 52% would vote for Scotland to become an independent country. The 16th poll in a row to show majority support for independence. The pollsters also quizzed people on how they intend to vote in the 2021 Holyrood elections, with the SNP projected to win 53% of the constituency vote and 41% of the regional list vote, putting the SNP on course for a parliamentary majority. The other parties in Scotland are left trailing the SNP, with the Tories and Labour far behind. Commenting, the SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown, MSP, said, "Once again, a poll shows that independence is becoming the settled will of the people of Scotland, with 16 polls in a row now showing majority support." With reports today that Douglas Ross would try to boycott a referendum, he's continuing to run away from democracy. And it shows how scared the Tories are of the verdict of the people. But this Trump-like denial of democracy will not stand with the people of Scotland. Now, we're also on the very last mile of Brexit talks, according to Ursula von der Leyen. The EU and UK negotiators are on the very last mile in negotiations for a trade accord, and the architecture in place is fine, but the details remain, the EU's chief executive said today. "We want a level playing field, but not only at the start, but also over time, and this is the architecture that we are building," she said. The EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, has told ambassadors and MEPs in Brussels that post-Brexit trade and security deal could be sealed as early as this week, after Boris Johnson made a key concession over the weekend. Barnier said that the Prime Minister's acceptance of the need for a treaty-level mechanism to ensure fair competition as regulatory standards diverge over time had unlocked the talks despite difficult issues remaining. Now, Ian Blackford has called today for Tory brinkmanship reckless today, commenting on the extension of the deadline for Brexit talks between the UK and the EU. The SNP's Westminster leader, Ian Blackford MP, has said, "The Tory government's plan to impose an extreme Brexit in the middle of a global health pandemic is irresponsible. But to persist with their Brexit brinkmanship is threatening no deal with less than 3 weeks to go until the transition period ends is plain reckless. Amidst warnings of disruption to food and medical supplies, as well as chaos and delays at the borders, the Tories continue to posture and leave businesses in the dark over trading terms from January the 1st. This crippling uncertainty must come to an end. The reality is that we face a low deal or a no deal, with either outcome causing long-lasting damage to Scotland, stripping away rights, holding back our economic recovery, costing jobs and hitting people's livelihoods. We also know that a no deal would be the worst outcome of all and impose hard-hitting tariffs. Boris Johnson must rule this out without delay. The way the Tories have ignored Scotland throughout this whole sorry Brexit mess makes clear beyond doubt that Westminster is not acting in Scotland's best interests. The only way to properly protect our interests is to become an independent country with our place in Europe. A new 20 billion nuclear power plant is apparently on the cards in England. The SNP has raised concerns that energy customers and the natural environment will pay a heavy price for the Tories' obsession with nuclear energy. After Boris Johnson approved the start of negotiations on funding a £20 billion nuclear reactor. The nuclear projects in the UK have suffered from high-profile delays and multi-billion-pound cost overruns in recent years, making them almost impossible to finance without leaving bill payers shouldering the costs in the long run. That's not to mention the significant carbon footprint of nuclear power compared with that from renewable sources. The world faces a climate crisis, and the SNP has called on the UK government to reinstate their support for the renewables industry, rather than building new nuclear power plants at astronomical costs over their lifetimes. Now, the UK government has rejected the Work and Pensions Committee's recommendations to scrap the two-child cap. Commenting on the UK government's rejection of the Work and Pension Committee's recommendation to scrap the two-child cap, the SNP's Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary Neil Gray MP said, "It's truly astonishing that the Tory government continues to ignore calls to scrap the two-child cap and the associated rape clause, including those of the SNP and the recommendation of the Work and Pensions Committee. The fact that the Tories are intent on sticking with this wicked policy, despite the mountain of evidence showing the damage it is inflicting on children, women and families across Scotland and the UK, shows just how out of touch with reality they are. The two-child cap and the rape clause has pushed hundreds of thousands of children and families into poverty, both before and during the coronavirus crisis. And it must be scrapped immediately before it causes further hardship. To continue with it amidst the global health pandemic is utter cruelty. The entire point of the welfare state should be to provide a safety net for all when their circumstances suddenly change, which in many cases happens for reasons out with their control. For millions, this is exactly what has happened as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The British Pregnancy Advisory Service has also found that the policies influencing women's decisions on abortion. Women are being forced to make an impossible choice between serious financial difficulty or terminating a pregnancy, a decision that no one should have to make. I'm urging the UK government to axe the two-child cap and the associated rape clause immediately, and to amend the UK social security system so that people are protected now and in the future. Okay, now the UK government has given a COVID contract or contracts to a firm co-founded by a Tory pollster. A political consultancy co-founded by the pollster who headed the Conservative Party's general election campaign was given a contract by the UK government without a competitive tender during the pandemic. Fleetwood Strategy, which was co-founded this year by Isaac Levido, was given a £124,000 contract by the Cabinet Office in April. The 37-year-old has been credited with playing a large part in securing Boris Johnson his landslide victory. The government had been accused of giving contracts to companies with links to the Conservative Party during the pandemic, drawing criticisms that it has created a chumocracy. The government has also been accused of being unnecessarily secretive after refusing to say which companies had been awarded multi-million-pound COVID contracts after being processed in a high-priority channel for firms with political connections. Official guidelines stipulate that government contracts should be published 30 days after being awarded. But the details of the contract given to Fleetwood were only published on a government website on Friday, 6 months later than they should have been. And now to America. The Electoral College is to confirm Joe Biden's victory. Electors are gathering in state capitals across the United States today to formally vote for Joe Biden as the next US president, effectively ending President Donald Trump's frenzied but failing attempt to overturn his loss in the November the 3rd election. The state-by-state votes, traditionally an afterthought, have taken an outsized significance this year because of Trump's assault on the democratic process. Pushing false claims of widespread fraud, Trump has pressured state officials to throw the election results out and declare him the winner. The election results show that Biden, the Democratic former vice president, won 306 electoral votes, exceeding the 270 needed to win, after 4 years under the Republican Trump. Biden and running mate Kamala Harris are due to take office on January the 20th. There's almost no chance that today's voting will negate Biden's victory, and his legal campaign to reverse the results floundering. Donald Trump's hopes of clinging to power will rest with a special meeting of the US Congress on January the 6th, where the odds against him are as good as insurmountable. Under a complicated system dating back to the 1780s, a candidate becomes US president not by winning a majority of the popular vote, but through an electoral college system, which allots electoral votes to the 50 states and the District of Columbia, largely based on their population. Those votes are being cast as we speak, with the result from California expected around 10 p.m. in what is expected to the state that pushes Biden over the winning line. And while there are sometimes a handful of rogue electors who vote for someone other than the winner of their state's popular vote, the vast majority rubber stamp the results, and officials do not expect anything different today. Trump has called on Republican state legislators to appoint their own electors, essentially ignoring the will of the voters. State lawmakers have largely dismissed the idea. Trump said last month that he will leave the White House if the Electoral College votes for Biden, but has since pressed on with his unprecedented campaign to overturn his defeat, filing without success numerous lawsuits challenging the state vote counts. Now, a report has said that a Russian FSB hit squad poisoned Alexei Navalny. An undercover hit squad working for Russia's FSB spy agency poisoned the opposition activist Alexei Navalny in August after shadowing him on multiple previous trips, the investigative website Bellingcat has claimed. Citing voluminous telecoms and travel data, Bellingcat reported that the squad had secretly tracked Navalny since 2017. The operation had apparently begun after he announced plans to stand against Vladimir Putin in presidential elections. The FSB surveillance team followed him to more than 30 destinations on overlapping flights, Bellingcat said. It may first have tried to poison him in July this year when Navalny travelled to Kaliningrad for a romantic break with his wife Yulia, it suggested. During that trip, Yulia felt abruptly unwell. She sat down at a beachside cafe and managed to stagger with difficulty back to her hotel. I felt sicker than I have ever felt in my life, she recalled. By the next morning, she had recovered. 1 month later, Navalny flew to Siberia as part of his campaign to get voters to back anti-Kremlin candidates in the Duma elections. He collapsed on a flight from Tomsk to Moscow. The plane made an emergency landing at Omsk, where Navalny was treated in hospital before being taken to Germany. German doctors have confirmed that Navalny had been poisoned with Novichok, the same lethal nerve agent used by 2 Moscow assassins against Sergei and Yulia Skripal. Now, moving back to home now, and a response to the hate crime bill report. The overwhelming majority of the committee's recommendations have been accepted by the Scottish Government ahead of the Stage 1 debate. These include a strengthening of protection for freedom of expression provisions, ensuring the test of the term abusive in the bill is an objective test, bringing within the bill's hate crime framework the existing offence of racially aggravated harassment, and finally proposing new limits on police powers of search and entry within the bill. In addition, and reflecting on the concerns raised by some faith groups, artists, authors and others, the Scottish Government will seek to remove entirely Section 5 from the bill, which deals with offences relating to possession of inflammatory materials. And now on to childcare, and an expansion of childcare from August 2021. All eligible children will benefit from at least 1,140 hours of funded early learning and childcare from August 2021, the Children's Minister has announced. The expansion of funded ELC, originally intended for August 2020, was paused in April to give local authorities the flexibility to focus on responding to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. A new date has now been agreed with the local authority umbrella group COSLA. And now 30% of Scotland's land is to be protected for nature. Plans to protect at least 30% of Scotland's land for nature by 2030 and to examine options to extend this further have been announced today by the Environment Secretary Rosanna Cunningham. The proposals were published in the new Statement of Intent on Biodiversity, which sets out the Scottish Government's priorities for tackling biodiversity loss as part of a twin crisis approach to ending our contribution to climate change and ecological decline. I beg your pardon. Currently, 37% of Scotland's marine environment receives protection, with 22.7% of terrestrial land protected for nature. The statement commits to increasing protection on land to 30% by 2030 and examining options to extend this even further. The announcement comes ahead of the publication of the Scottish Government's Climate Change Plan update very shortly, with nature-based solutions to climate challenge expected to form a key part of the update. Restoring peatland and woodland creation will be at the heart of the proposals and are supported by an additional £500 million of previously committed investment in our natural economy. Ms Cunningham launched the statement at a summit convened to discuss the enormous opportunities in restoring Scotland's peatland areas and how to make this happen at the scale required. Other commitments in the document include plans to support new locally driven projects that aim to improve ecological connectivity, endorsing the Leaders' Pledge for Nature presented at this year's United Nations General Assembly, and developing a new national strategy on biodiversity. And that is about it from the slightly shorter version of Scotland at 7 this evening. I will be back again on Thursday, and Kenny McBride will be hosting the show tomorrow. But from me here at Broadcasting Scotland, that's it for this evening. A very good evening to you.
The Catalans, the Basques, the Galicians in the Basque.
An independent future for Scotland.
How quickly do you think a referendum can be arranged?
Best practice demands that it should be 6 months.
Just looking at the overall share numbers for Scotland at the moment, the SNP 46.4%.